Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of Karis Circle. Karis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Karis Books. And Karis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are really excited to be here with everybody. We've got a full house physically here at Karis, and we have a full digital house with folks from all around the world, literally folks on multiple continents watching with us tonight, which is awesome. So we are really, really, really excited to be here celebrating with all of you for this brand new hot off the press book, TCM Underground, 50 Must-See Films from the world of classic cult and late night cinema. So y'all know what you're here for. You know what you're in for. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking or introducing anything, but I do just want to say we're here with Danielle Henderson, who is a TV writer, retired freelance writer, and our former editor for Wiki. She co-hosts the film podcast you may be familiar with, I Saw What You Did, and a book based on her popular website, Feminist Ryan Gosling, was released by Running Press in August 2012. And I got to tell you, Danielle, it was a Karis bestseller.
That was 10 years ago?
Yes, because I was telling our younger staff person about that, and you know, she was like 13 when it happened.
You are shutting your face right now.
She didn't know that Ryan Gosling was like a hot feminist meme. Time moves fast.
Oh my God.
I know.
Incredible, incredible. It makes sense. I feel every bit of the age of that statement.
It's a feminist classic, and it continues to age well. So she is here tonight to help Millie DeChiguro, who is the chief programmer of TCM Underground, celebrate this awesome book. Millie hosts the companion YouTube series TCM Slumberground. She is also one half of the film podcast, I Saw What You Did, which spotlights unexpected thematic double features. And of course, she lives right here in Atlanta, Georgia. We're so excited to have this really fun wisdom in the room with us. So without further ado, welcome to you both. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. That was really what a great intro.
Yes, I have to say right off the bat, thank you, ER. Thank you, everybody at Karis. Thank you, Diana at TCM. This is truly an honor for me. I've been shopping at Karis since I was like 18 years old. And back when it was in a little 5 Points location, and when I was taking women's studies classes at GSU, I'd come out here and get my textbooks and everything. So the idea that I'm sitting here right now talking about a book that I wrote is blowing my mind. I'm not going to get emotional about it, but I'm just saying.
I'm going to make you cry so hard. So hard. I was excited to be here. Thank you everyone for joining us virtually. I forgot to take my coat off, but now I can't because I'm sweating so hard. And it's like the protective layer of all the power
I know it very well. I know it well.
You know what's going on. All right. Not give you buck.
Yeah. Not give you buck.
Oh my God. I am psyched to talk about this book with you. As you know, it is an honor for me to be here talking with you. I love Millie. She's my best friend, and I just could not be happier. We'll get into the act of writing the book and how that made you cry. But I wanted to start out by just pointing out simply that writing this book is a feminist act. That in the world of legitimized film criticism, it's awash with men and the male perspective. So I wanted to ask you that by writing this book with Toya Murray, what did you want to bring to that conversation?
Well, right off the bat here, I have to say we wish that Toya could be here with us. She's in France.
Boo-hoo!
Yeah. So it's probably like 1 a.m. and it's her birthday, so she's probably not thinking about anything.
Oh,
she's in Paris being married. So yeah, we wish she was here. But yeah, so what's the question? No, I completely lost my train of thought. I was just thinking about Paris.
The question is, what did you want to bring to the conversation by writing this book, since the world of film criticism is still so male and so white?
Yeah, I mean, this is. I've been thinking about this a lot actually, because So much of my film education came from, cisgender hetero white guys, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine, right? Because when I was growing up, this was like a pre-internet era. There was still a lot of like gatekeeping going around, and like I just was so interested in like learning anything about film that I was just like, give me every book, and I don't care who wrote it, just like let me be in the world. And I was just doing that thing that you do when you're a teenager, which is that you just want to be around people that speak your language, or at least speak the language that you want to speak at some point. And so I was hanging out a lot downtown, hanging out in record stores and video stores. I was, going to the library, going to like Tower Records and Oxford Books. I don't know if everybody remembers Oxford Books. And I would go and buy film guides like this. And so it would be stuff like Michael Weldon's Psychotronic Guide to Film. That was a huge book for me. Danny Perry's Cult Movies books. And then just like Video Hound's Guide to Cult Movies and all these like, huge, sort of texts that had tons and tons of movie reviews. Right. And even stuff like the Leonard Maltin guides and Pauline Kael guides and that kind of stuff. So I was just kind of wanting to read about movies so much. So when we had the opportunity to do this book, I just kind of thought about the idea of like, I'm finally getting a crack at like contributing to this conversation. And with maybe the exception of Pauline Kael, honestly, it was all older white men. Yeah. And so I thought, well, shoot your shot. You know what I mean? Like if you're going to do this, like bring on somebody or work with somebody who could also provide a really good counter perspective to all these things that we've learned. And then, go for it. Like write about things that you want to talk about, things that you wish that you had read about and known about when you were a teenager that didn't kind of get presented to you as like a cult movie. Because that's something that we actually really thought about when we were writing and picking the movies that we picked, was this idea of like, well, we could write about Eraserhead and Pink Flamingos and like all of the movies that were sort of these huge midnight classics, which are great movies, but they just hadn't been talked about so much. And we were like, well, if we have this opportunity, let's bring some other films that kind of shaped us and made us to be the women that we are. And, what does that look like? So, we just wanted to, when we had the opportunity, we were like, let's go for it. So
I'm really glad you did, because more people need to know that the Garbage Pail Kids movie is foundational text. What's interesting is that you don't indicate who wrote which essay in this book. I know exactly which ones you wrote.
Okay.
I know all 25. We could play a drinking game with it later.
Okay.
I know all 25. I'm like, Garbage Pail Kids movie. But this is also, it's part of my next question. I know this is something that we've talked about a lot too, is that it's 2023, and I'm wondering, what is it going to take to kind of bring this slow progress in this field of film criticism and film to a more diverse place? Like what will it take?
Well, I mean, I just think it's we're just gonna have to kind of bang the door down or something. You know what I mean? That's kind of like, I don't know, because I think about this all the time, like who gets to do anything? You know what I mean? And of course it comes from like privilege and power and like generational wealth and things like that. But it's that thing of like, for this particular world, which is, cult movies is a pretty like cool, it kind of reminds me of like punk rock. It's like this, underground kind of cool, universe. And I still am like, well, then how did this still get co-opted by straight white guys? I don't understand how this keeps happening. But I think that that's changing. I think that for me personally, I think the internet changed it a lot because it brought a lot of diverse, especially film writing and film criticism. It brought a lot of that to the forefront. So now there are so many different types of people who write film criticism. Yeah. When it comes to like film distribution and film exhibition, I think that that's kind of this like new frontier that we ought to think about maybe taking over. Yeah. Because I feel like those two things in particular are really what kind of set this kind of stuff into motion. Like, why is a movie like Eraserhead celebrated? Like, who found it? Who brought it out? Who shows it at movie theaters? Who restores it? Who's doing all that work? And I feel like that's like a frontier for people like us to go down, because it's like, we've seen it kind of with the horror movie genre, where we have now, I mean, horror movies when I was growing up were kind of the domain of like, you know, cool white guys. And I feel like now we now
And my
understand.
grandma. And my grandma.
And your grandma. She was a pioneer, for sure. But you know, it's like now we have like, you know, the horror noir documentary, which obviously talks a lot about Black horror fans, and like there's so many LGBTQ horror fans. So it's that thing of like, we're there. We just need to like, you know, take the door down, you know.
Kick it in a little bit more.
Kick it in a little bit more.
I'm all for it. I think that's a great answer. And it kind of goes back to something we were talking about yesterday, where Millie had never seen Black Mirror. And so I made her watch 3 episodes, and then she had nightmares. And I thought, like, well, to come down from the Black Mirror experience, we watched a couple of old episodes of Spaced, TV show, TV show Spaced. And it got us talking about like how we wish that, you know, looking at this lineage of Edgar Wright and Nick Frost and Simon Pegg, going from creating things together in just a fun way, and then turning it into worldwide, internationally renowned careers, and like wishing that women and girls got the chance to do that. So that kind of leads into why I think that this sort of text and this sort of book and your approach to this world that you've been in for 20 years is incredibly important.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, look, when it comes down to it, like I find that it's interesting that guys like that tend to like gang together. You know what I mean? Like they all get famous together. They're like a crew, and they do their art together. And we could do that too. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's, you know, I feel like for me personally, I'm always like, I don't know if it's because I played team sports when I was a kid, but I'm always interested in like getting together with people that are cool and creative. I mean, that's why I wanted to co-write a book. That's why I wanted to co-host podcasts. That's why I want to do stuff like Underground, which includes like all my friends, because I'm not that type of person that just wants to be like, I'm not a lead singer. I'm a band person. I like to be, you know what I mean? Like I'm not a solo artist. So, and I feel like that mentality that is happening in Hollywood all the time.
Right.
You know? And I feel like, again, it's just this moment where you sit there and go, oh, well, then how come they get to do it and have a lot of success? And we know why. I'm just speaking, you know, rhetorically, I guess. But it's that thing of like, we have the tools, right? We have the people. There's so many creative people out there. There's so many people that, you know, deserve a shot. And I think if we can just align with the same-minded folks, that we could do great things. So
this is an excellent way to introduce our new cult coming to you in 2023. We're gonna do it. One thing, I mean, these are not all very intense questions. I wanted to also ask you, what was the most fun movie that you wrote about, or what movie did you have the most fun writing about?
I mean, it has to be the Garbage Pail Kids.
Tell us why.
Well, because it was like, first of all, so when that movie initially aired on TCM, I was having like real questions about like, is this the right thing to do? Is this moral? Should we be playing a movie like the Garbage Pail Kids movie on TCM?
Is Millie okay, essentially?
Yes, but also like, am I doing something bad? Like in this world, listen, the Garbage Pail Kids movie, I don't know if anybody's seen it. Is anybody? Yes?
As a kid.
As a kid, yes. So if you do a rewatch, you're just gonna be like, what is this? Like, what happened? How did this happen? There's it's a very weird movie. And so when it initially aired, we like put it on, and then I just like went and hid from the internet for like 24 hours. You know, I mean, there's a lot of that already on TCM. Like something airs that was made in like the 80s or later, and then it's like people are like, it's changing, everything's falling apart. And I'm like, oh gosh, it's just an 80s movie. So
it's still over 40 years old.
Yeah. So it gets a little like scary when something like that happens, because then it becomes this thing where it's like, well, this is such garbage. I can't believe it's playing on TCM. But whatever, it happened.
Right.
And so when it came up as a potential movie to write about, I was like, well, clearly I have to write about this, because then I have to research it. And that's like the fun part, is like going down the rabbit hole of some of these movies and figuring out like how they got made.
Yeah.
And like all that whole backstory is so fascinating to me. So yeah, that was probably fun. That was probably the fun is.
That's
But
awesome.
I had a lot of fun writing the book, obviously, because it's all movies that are fun. So.
And I like how you took that the everything you were just talking about in terms of the research and made the sidebars of like, you know, the oh my god moments and you know, giving people more genre, like generally speaking. Like I just kind of like that you were able to kind of keep that research going for people who were interested in learning about these films and kind of again like this is how you're going to be part of the exact universe that shaped you as a person.
Well, and that's so funny you say that because those breakout sections, I mean, I think that, you know, when we were, you know, working with the publishers, you know, they were like, oh, you know, just those are cool things for people as they're reading books. Like, you know, readers love kind of little distractions. I don't know.
They can't read more than 2 sentences, for God's sakes. Please give them something else on the
Give them
page.
a list. Give them a picture. No, but when we were putting them together, it reminded me a lot of like those kinds of things that were in like all of those film reference guides that I grew up on. And it was kind of like, I know it's visually like a kind of cool thing to look at when you're flipping through a book, but also these were like sections that like provided straight up like movie lists.
Exactly.
You know, and it would be like, here's every movie that Doris Wishman ever made or whatever. And then I just literally copy it down on a piece of notebook paper because this was the old days. So I would basically like copy down the list on a piece of note paper and then go to the video store and be like, I'm renting Nude on the Moon today. This is on my list.
Or ordering it.
Yeah, or ordering it. But it was mostly like, you know, those types of like sections of the book for me were very helpful, just in a very quick way. So
I think that's rad.
yeah.
I definitely, since you brought it up, I want you to kind of give some background about your job and Underground and how it came to be. You do mention it in the intro of the book and talk extensively about how Underground came to be and how you've already shown like over 400 films on Underground. So tell people what you do. And I know that you tried to do this at a college last week and people were like, what's TV? What's cable? So maybe you don't have to go that in depth. But what is your job? And talk about Underground a little bit and how, you know, you got to be able to be part of this world of cult film in general.
Well, I'll ask the question to this room that I asked these 18-year-olds. Does everybody know what TCM is? Does everybody know what term classification is? Okay. Good. You should see in the room when I asked that question. Oh my God. I was like, oh no. So yeah, I mean, I started out, like I started TCM in 2004. And I was just sort of a few years out of undergrad and I went to film school at GSU. And, you know, I actually didn't, to be honest, I didn't know, I thought I was going to go into the music industry because that was kind of, I had worked at the college radio station. I worked for Album 88 and I was a music director there for a few years and I had a radio show. And so I was like, I graduated college and I was like, well, I'm going to go in the music industry. And then I was like, no, you're not, because the music industry just collapsed. So there are no jobs for you. And I was like, oh no. So I was looking to stay in Atlanta and I knew that I liked film and I was in film school. And so then, you know, I had the opportunity to apply for a job and I got the job, thankfully. And, you know, I was really interested in programming because I had come from a programming background for radio. And so, and I just think, I don't know, now that I think about it after all these years, I think I have like a programmer's brain. Like, it's all really about organizing things into themes. And I think like organization is my skill set. Like it's like I like to put books in order. I like to put music in sets. I like to put movies by theme. It's just how my brain works, right? So the programming department was like a really perfect place for me because it was just a way for me to be like, oh, so you have this entire channel 24 hours a day and you have to think about how to build like themes. And, you know, we have the way that TCM works is that no movie is ever played randomly, right? It's always within the context of the theme. So it's either a star or a director or like a genre or something like that. And so over the years, like, you know, I was basically like learning how to be a programmer. And then like, I guess it was probably about 2 years after I started, there was this opportunity to create this cult movie show called TCM Underground. And it was created or it was thought of by this marketer named Eric Weber. And he he and I met pretty much on my first day. Like he was basically like, do you like John Waters? I'm like, yes. And he's like, we're gonna be best friends. So we started hanging out, and he had told me that he had pitched this idea for Underground. And I was like, I definitely want in on that. This sounds like it's such a cool thing. And then it kind of, sat there for a while. And then eventually they said, hey, we're doing it. So we were like, cool. And then unfortunately, Eric left pretty much right after it started. So I was kind of like left with, they were like, well, do you want to keep it going? I'm like, okay, like, let's go. So, and that was 2006. So throughout the years, it just has kept going and going and going. And so when we were coming up with the list for the book, because we knew that the book wanted to be like anchored by the franchise. And then we were like, well, do we talk about every movie? Or do we talk about like the movies that have ever played? And I'm like, well, let me pull a list of titles that have played. And I'm like, oh, this has been on since 2006. It's come on every week since 2006.
Well, to be this big, you could do every movie.
No. And like, it was crazy because I was like, oh, there's like 400 or so titles to pick from. And so it made kind of our, Toy and I's job of picking movies pretty easy because we were like, oh my gosh, there's so many things to pick from. So
great.
But that to me is, I think, like why I'm still there. Because just working at TCM as a programmer is kind of a dream. I mean, it still is. I've been there for almost 20 years, which is like hard to believe, but it's just sort of like, it fits like, again, my weird skill set. And it's such a joy to work with the people that I work with. And, I don't know. To me, it's just a really fun job. And I love being a programmer.
Well, I love that you are a programmer because Underground is one of the funniest and best parts of still having cable.
Yeah.
100%. And Slumberground is also here with us.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched Slumberground, you absolutely should. Now, you mentioned earlier that you had a really good time writing this book, and I have several text messages and voicemails that would absolutely contradict that.
Yes, I know.
So I want you to tell me how it really was to write this book, because I also want to know if you would write another book.
Yeah.
I think you're an incredible essayist, and I really like your approach to film and this world. So I want to know if this was so demoralizing and horrible that you wouldn't continue to do it, or would you write another one?
If they let me do it, I would absolutely do it again, despite the fact that you do have a ton of voicemails of me just like crying. It was, I mean, I've never done this before. I went to grad school, so I sort of knew what it was like to write a bunch, but this was on like a whole other level, obviously, and we did it during the pandemic. So there was also that whole component where I was living in LA at the time, and then I made this like crazy decision to just leave. And I thought I was going to come back, but then I just didn't go back, weirdly enough. But then there was this period of time where I was like living in my parents' guest bedroom in Florida. And that's pretty much where I wrote the book. I wrote it in their guest bedroom. And we had like a pretty small window of time. So it was this like shortened writing window in this like weird environment, not with my stuff, not with the things that comforted me, like my things and my, my DVDs. Like my parents don't even own DVDs. Their TV setup is so bad. I love my parents, but like as a film person, you're like, oh my God, like that weird smoothing movement thing is on that TV. And, like, they don't even have it. Like they don't have a Blu-ray player.
Are you reading your parents for filth right now?
They know. Oh, they know. I was like, you know what? You don't have the tools that I need to like watch movies with any kind of quality. So it was that thing of like, I was like not in the environment that I would normally write in, I think. And so, yeah, and Toya was in France. She had just moved to France. So we were kind of like in two different time zones. So we had some things working against us a little bit, but like it weirdly came together. And, with her and I being in two separate places, like we basically like picked our movies and then we're like, see you in 6 months. Like that's kind of how it worked. Like there was no like, we didn't edit each other's stuff. Like we just like got down to business on our own. I mean, I obviously trust her and her taste and her voice, and she's a great writer and she has great taste. So it wasn't like I needed to even care about what she was doing because I just trusted that she was going to do a great job. So yeah, I mean, it was like it was hard. And like having not done it before, and especially the editing process blew me away. Like,
Yeah.
Wow, like you get all this feedback in one sitting. Like you get an entire book of people like saying that doesn't make sense. This is bad. This, you spelled this wrong. You spelled church wrong or whatever. I'm like, did I really? Like I spelled everything wrong. And so, you know, it was just that process of like, I don't know, just getting a lot of feedback in one sitting, and then just having the process of going through it and writing. It's very emotional.
Yeah.
And I never thought that. And because you have written 2 books, I was like, I needed to talk to you almost every day. Because
I was happy to do it because it's such a wild process. And
Yeah.
I think that there are moments where a lot of self-doubt can creep in that editing process. Like I remember when my memoir came out, and I was right before it came out, we were going through the editing process, and at one point the editor was like, I don't think that David Lee Roth's I Ain't Got Nobody was released. Like according to this website, it was released. And I'm like, but I definitely sang it and danced to it, and it was my life, so I'm pretty sure it did. But it has you doubting like every moment of what you're thinking we're trying to put out in the world, and the judgment, and it feels judgmental in a way that, because it's also very cold. There's no like emojis or emotion or anything.
Yeah.
It's like, this is wrong, and you're like, okay. Like, so sorry, ma'am.
Yeah.
But it's like very cold. It's a cold process, and it needs to be.
yes.
But I think that it was wonderful to be able to help you through that, because I had to have my own breakdown on my own when I was
Yeah.
going through it. I'm like, I guess nothing in my life is real. I don't know. Like,
Yeah. No, and that was the thing too that I think that you were really good to talk me through, was because so much of this book, right, is, I mean, like I came at it, I won't speak for Toya, but I came at it with this like, oh my gosh, I have this opportunity to contribute to this like canon or whatever. This is my shot, right? And I want to honor that, and I want to honor my teenage self for not having like a book like this, and I want to honor like other people that may now be inspired to even watch these movies or write a book of themselves or whatever. So I had like a lot of that on my shoulders, and I think I just didn't know how to manage that part all the time. And then on top of that, you were basically like coming to the table going, well, these are my selections, and I have to make the case for this stuff.
Right.
And what if some guy comes on the internet one day and says, this movie sucks, I don't even know why it's in this book. I was just having all those inner thoughts. And it was hard because I was like, and especially when you go through the editing process too, of like somebody actually having to poke and prod things that you think about as, you know, in that way, like I would come, like there was like entire sections of the book where I'd be writing about a movie, and I knew what I liked the movie, but I was like, but do other people, are they gonna get it? Like, are they gonna think it's funny and weird, or is it just me, you know? And so I was just getting in that feedback loop kind of thing. And I just remember you were really good to walk me through all that. And, you know, it really just was helpful to know somebody that had written a book. So I really appreciate it.
Girl, no problem. You know, I support you in anything, but that especially, because I'm like, we don't have to care about what people think about it. We just have to get through the process of writing it. Like,
Yeah.
we can't. That's the fun part, honestly, is writing it in solitude and going away for 6 months and doing your thing. So I wanted you to feel that fun.
Yeah.
And beyond that, there's nothing you can control. So
Yeah.
just be in the fun part of the process and then let it go. And
Right.
people, of course, people have thoughts and comments. They always do.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that I didn't want it to impact this incredibly important thing that you were doing.
Yeah.
And like the joy of it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I think that I've been trying to get you to write a book for a long time. So would you write another one?
Yes, I would. Obviously, I mean, I would like a little bit more time. That's all.
Yeah.
You know, just a little bit more time. And I get it. I mean, timelines are different for different things. And I know you didn't have a large timeline for Feminist Ryan Gosling, so I was like,
A month, girl.
I know you told me that, and I was like blown away.
Same publisher.
Yeah, I was like, wow, a month. I can't believe
And
that.
I was like, there goes my winter break and my sanity.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
No, but I would. I mean, now that I've done it, it's like, yeah, I think I would. I mean, if they asked us to do it again, if they asked us to come back with like a volume 2, I would definitely.
Yeah.
But then, you know, I don't know. Now I'm like, well, I already did the hardest thing I thought I could ever do. So maybe.
Yeah, keep that train going.
Sure.
Kick down that door.
I will. I'll try.
You
I
write
will.
you write an essay every week for the movies that we talk about.
That is true.
Like you have 90 essays right now.
Yeah,
Ready
it's
to
our
go.
book. I call it our book report.
And
Yeah, so I do my book report every week for the podcast. So
I know, like, I feel like our podcast is kind of like an extension of books like this
Yeah.
and the importance of books like this and kind of turning people into or onto movies that they otherwise would not watch. And I'm just really happy that you asked me to do that podcast with you and that we get to do that together. And
I mean, honestly, like it's such a joy doing it. I mean, and like this is something that I think is related to something that you just asked me earlier, which is that, you know, the idea of like bringing people together that have been so closed off from this world. And I feel like, especially when it comes to things like movies and music and like, you know, I never felt for years that I got to own any of the knowledge that I had. Like I always felt that it was like some guy has to tell me about the movie and then I like it, but I can never forget somebody showed me that movie. And I just never get to own it beyond that, right? Until like time moves on and you just keep doing what you do. And then eventually you're like, oh yeah, like this isn't nothing. Like I have built like a career, I've built like this entire thing that I'm very proud of. And like, how do I like make that work in the world, right? And so working with other people who are in that position too, where they're like, how do I own the thing that I want to own? Or how do I get my perspective out there? I mean, I just feel like whenever there's an opportunity to do that, when I get to work with or know smart people, I want to be around them. I don't want to like push them away to be like, I'm competing with them. You know what I mean? What's
there's only be one brain in this room.
I am not that. Like I love teamwork, and that's why we're doing the podcast with you. It's so great because it's another area. There's a lot of guys in our line of work there too. I mean, a lot of like film podcasts that are hosted by cishet white guys, and you know we're not going that route. And the way that we decided to talk about the movies is different. You know, the way that we come at it is different. We, I think, have no. We're not trying to prove anything. We're just doing what we want to do. And I don't know. I love that space. It feels very safe. It feels very welcoming for me. Yeah. You know, so I appreciate that. I'm glad that you decided to do it.
It does for me too. And I think we could sit in the room and shout at each other in that way of like, guitar, trutho, Pasolini. Like we could do that if we wanted to, but it just doesn't feel conversational or inviting or it doesn't. It's kind of like when I was in grad school and I looked around and I'm like, am I going to be talking to the same 5 people for the rest of my life? Because that's not actual knowledge.
Yeah.
If I can't translate this to a wider audience or bring more people into this.
Right.
So I just feel like it's really wonderful to see that you're with this book and in general kind of stretching and using your knowledge and your incredible expertise to like bring all of us into the fold. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I believe in this. I have gone on podcasts and gone like 3 hours on very like intense film subjects. And I've done very intense film writing, you know, and that kind of stuff. And it's like, it's great. I like being able to do those things, but I just don't feel like it's inviting to people who are not already in that world. Right. And when we were thinking about the film podcast, when we were thinking about the book, I think that we just were like, let's be more open. Like, let's invite people to this world and not like be like, well, we're really smart and we know what we're talking about. And like, if you're not, then, you know, F off or whatever. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. I like the vibe of it better. Like, as being in both worlds, I like the vibe of this better. You know what I mean?
Me too. I love it. We're very heavily influenced by Goonies. It's our time. Well, I think I want to open it up to questions, so I don't get to hog you because I can just talk to you about movies all the time. So Yar, you're gonna go ahead with the mic. And you can ask Millie anything you want. You can ask me anything you want. But
so we have some virtual questions to kick it off while folks who are in this room kind of get warmed up. So Millie, regarding your career in film, was there a specific movie that made you realize you wanted to write about or study film? That's a question from Lindsay.
Yes. The film for me that was my absolute, like, it kicked off my entire love of cult movies was this movie called Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. And it was, for me, it changed my life, basically. I had never seen women of color in that role, because in the movie, the three women who are in the film, the three stars of the film, are technically the bad girls. Like they're creating all the aggression in the film, right? And they're like pulling out knives and like strangling people in the desert. And for me, seeing an Asian woman in that role, first of all, I've never seen an Asian woman but at that time, prior to that, I had not seen an Asian woman in an action movie before, basically. And on top of that, I never saw sexy Asian ladies and sexy women who were in this role of power, you know what I mean? And they were beating guys up. Like, I was like, what?
Sign me up.
Yeah, it was totally, it like radicalized me, basically. So from that point on, like, I just was like, well, I gotta see like every movie that these women were in. I gotta see every Russ Meyer movie. And then that, of course, tumbled into like the John Waters world and everything. So it was like, that was the moment that I think was what really kicked all of it off. And we've technically played it on Underground. And like, I thought maybe I could write about it, but it hasn't been written about a lot. Yeah. And there was a moment where I was like, well, I think I should have written about it. So if there's a volume 2, I'll definitely write about it. But
nice. Yeah, I think your perspective on a movie that's been written about a lot is still very warranted.
Yeah, so hopefully if we do something else, I will write about it for sure. So.
So we have somebody asking, as a fan of your podcast, how did y'all meet?
The internet.
My journal.
There's a live journal and then a Tumblr, and like we just like followed each other because we had mutual friends. Who were friends with each other. And then I came down to Atlanta when I was looking at schools for my PhD program, and I was looking at Emory. And Millie and I had dinner with our friend Shalewa Sharp, and I was like, oh, she's cool as hell.
Yeah.
And we just like kept in contact and were actual friends from that point forward. And then we both moved to LA around the same time, and just hated it together. It's so hard. You're like my life raft where I'm like, can you believe we live it? You're like, I can't believe we live here.
Yeah, no, we went to the ArcLight together as like, it was kind of like our therapy sessions, because we were like, you know, just new to the city, and watching movies was pretty much the only thing that for me was like felt restorative, and you know, like it just felt like obviously LA is such a great movie town, but it was that thing of like going to the movies and having that ritual with you, and then we would come out of the movie, we would sit in the parking lot and just talk about the movie. And I remember even before we got offered the podcast, I remember like going, we should do a podcast.
Oh yeah, we were like, we should do a podcast, and then we looked at each other and went, neither one of us wants to learn how to be like an audio engineer.
Like, how do you do a podcast?
Buy a microphone, or like buy a microphone.
So really do that? Yeah,
that's exactly right. Came to into the picture, because we would have just still been like, should we really buy like an AI cord? Like, we have to buy a cord.
Yeah.
And like, but yeah, that was fortuitous for sure.
Yeah.
And a big part of our friendship. And I just feel like, do you remember that night we were at the ArcLight? And I don't think we've been able to tell this story on the podcast. Like, we've told it once and it always gets cut for some reason.
Oh boy.
It was that guy that when we were there with my 2 buddies from Australia.
Oh my god, yeah.
And it was Halloween, and somebody was standing out in front of the ArcLight dressed like Michael Myers, and just standing there with like a wrench or something, like dressed like Michael Myers, and it was freaking everybody out. And my friends were so freaked out that they're like, we can't sit in this movie because America is terrifying. And we might get killed. So we had to leave the movie. I think we were going to go see the new Suspiria.
Yes.
And we had to leave because my friends were so freaked out. And then security came and like tried to talk to the Michael Myers person who was dressed up. And that person was like in the role and just kept standing there. Like security had to like physically take them away.
Yeah.
I think it was a woman too, and I'm like, yeah, girl, go for it. My friends are like, we're gonna get murdered in this American movie theater.
Well, and like, I hope this isn't too inside baseball about LA, but I legit, when I lived like pretty much the entire time I lived there, I thought that people standing on the street wearing any costume was being paid by some company. I didn't realize that like, oh no, it's just people show up and scare people.
Yep.
Like they were like they're just freelancers. I don't know. Like people who just show up in the movies like, what if I freak everybody out right now? Including these two poor Australian guys who were like totally terrified. We're like, and we were like, okay, I guess we're not.
We're like, we come to the Arc Planet every week. This is nothing for us.
Yeah, so.
Nothing, but it was really. I had a great time in LA, hanging out with you and going to theaters, and like our friendship definitely deepened. And but we met to answer the original question on the internet the way everyone our age met. We were in our early 30s, and we're both very loyal, so we just kept it going.
Yeah.
Love to see it. Anybody in the room want to ask a question before we get back to our virtual meetings?
All right. I'm just gonna click that on. I think it's
Hey, did you, what?
as an Asian.
Was there one film that was like an incredibly hard choice? You don't have to name it if you don't want, or was there one just like to make the cut? Was there one movie that was just so incredibly hard?
Well, I will say that Toya and I, when we picked our 25, because we basically did 25 and 25, we only had two that overlapped, right? And it was Little Darlings and Ganja and Hess. And it was this thing where we were both like, we didn't want to like, a knock if you buck, I suppose. So we were just sort of like, okay, like, and then at some point I just said, you know what, like, I think about, I want to hear what she has to say about Little Darlings, just personally, and I want to hear what she has to say about Ganja and Hess personally. So I just like kind of let her have them, because I was just like, I'm not, it's no skin off my back to not write about those movies, and someone cool and smart and interesting is going to write about them, and but then there was a lot of I revised my list maybe like once or twice, and it was really just more about like kind of having the balance of what is this something that I feel like needs a little bit more of a spotlight, because I mean there are films in the book that are very well known, like The Harder They Come and like Blackula and like things like that. I mean, a lot of people know these movies, but there was like a moment where like I could write about Pink Flamingos, or I could try to write about Polyester, which feels like it hasn't been written about as much as Pink Flamingos or something. And so when I was kind of reordering that list, I was just kind of shuffling things around and keeping things in mind. And it was really like, Faster Pussycat is probably the best example. Is really that like idea of, well, I love this movie. It kicked off everything for me, but then I feel like it has been written about sort of so much that maybe I would rather talk about like Remember My Name, which is like definitely a movie I want more people to know about. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the choice not to credit the essays? And Matt asks, will there be any place, perhaps online, where folks can find out who wrote which essays?
I gotta be honest. I have no idea why we didn't attribute ourselves. I don't know why that didn't happen.
I know. I'll tell you which ones Millie wrote. I will go through the different comments right now.
Oh my gosh.
And tell you which ones you wrote.
We'll see.
I'll do 5. I'll see if I get them right. Okay. I saw what you did.
Yes.
Honeymoon Killers.
Yes.
Silent Partner.
Yes.
Remember My Name.
Yes.
The Baby.
Yes.
Let's see. Two-Lane Blacktop.
No.
Ooh.
Bullshit.
Decline of Western Civilization.
Yeah. I went with the first and second one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Woo. I'm back.
Yes. Yeah.
Garbage Hill Kids movie. Xanadu.
No.
Ooh.
That's Toya one.
Head.
Toya.
Damn. All right, they're gonna have to put it themselves. So you answered the question.
That was valiant. I appreciate it.
I tried.
But to answer your question, you know what? I don't know. Maybe we'll figure out a way to do that. how do I do that?
Just put it on Instagram.
I don't know, Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why we didn't do it. I truly don't know. And I didn't think about it. I was just like, get the book out. Like, don't think about anything else. Just get it going. And then now I'm like, oh yeah, I guess we didn't do that. So.
Well, I also have another question for you.
Um,
The full title of this book is TCM Underground: 50 Must-See Films from the World of Classic Cult and Late Night Cinema. What is the difference for you between classic cult movies and late night cinema?
Okay. Classic cult to me is that kind of cult canon, like Eraserhead, The Harder They Come, Pink Flamingos, you know, that kind of stuff. Plan 9 from Outer Space, you know, like everything that we were told, you know, in high school, it's like, you should watch this weird movie. Late night cinema, I think, is just, I think it's broader than that. I think it doesn't have to be horror or a B movie. It can be something like a quirky melodrama, you know? And, you know, I don't know, late night cinema to me is sort of just more, it kind of is more of less of a strict definition. And it's more just sort of like if it feels a little off, it goes, you know, which is, I think part of what my contribution to the book, a large part of what I contributed title-wise, like that section that's called domestic disturbances and that entire section is pretty much all me, because they were more or less all sort of melodramas that were, I mean, and like there's a title in the book called Butcher, Baker, Nagger, Baker, right? Which has sort of been loosely classified as like a slasher or a horror movie. But I feel like the bones of it is a women's melodrama, right? Because it's about this older woman, an aunt, who's very lonely. And it becomes this like grand dame guignol thing where she's just like, well, I'm so lonely that I have to trap the people that I love because no one will love me, right? Which is like such a classic grand dame guignol hagsploitation, as it's called, trope, right? Which is that like the older woman who can't find love, so she has to trap people, right? That's how desperate she is. So to me, like I took that movie and thought, well, yes, I could write about it as a horror movie, but really to me, it feels like something much different.
Yeah.
And then I started seeing kind of a through line between movies like that and like Secret Ceremony and some of the other titles in that section. And that's kind of like what I mean is that it's like those things were never presented to me as classic cult,
Right.
right? And I don't know if it's because they were seen as feminine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I think of when I think of like opening up the door to all these other titles, right? The late night cinema part, meaning like, no, we're not just gonna play B science fiction from the 50s. Like it's also this, and this. So I think that's the distinction.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Also, I want to redeem myself a little bit. Did you write about Mary Jane's Not a Virgin anymore?
I sure did.
All right.
Yeah.
We got a friend right up here.
Hey, hi.
Hey, Hogan.
Love that shirt.
Thank you. We all know, so I know we all know he's a big cinephile, like I'm sure many of us are, but can you tell us a little bit about how Patton Oswalt got involved writing the foreword to the book?
Yes. So back in the old times of 2006, when we were first starting the franchise, there was just sort of a loose list of people. We actually had a host, by the way. I don't know if anybody knew that. For the first season of Underground, we had Rob Zombie hosting. He only hosted half of the first season, and then it went to the way it is now, which is that nobody hosted. It's just kind of like
You can't follow Rob Zombie.
you know. So when we were kind of deciding like who could this person be, I was, you know, there's a lot of names thrown in the hat or whatever, and then I really had wanted Patton to do it kind of at the very beginning because at the time he had his first comedy album out and I thought it was hilarious. And I got this sense that he was like a movie guy just based on the references, like in his comedy and stuff. Like he'd said something about the man from Laramie in one of his jokes. And I was like, who the hell like makes a man from Laramie joke to like a bunch of drunk kids in Athens. So I just had this sense that he seemed cool and he liked movies, and then for whatever reason that actually didn't work out, and then Rob Zombie happened. So when cut to over the years when the franchise was happening without a host, he was always just really supportive of the franchise. Like he was retweeting stuff from our Twitter account, and he came to a couple of our film festivals, and he was always very like supportive of like the films that were playing. So I don't know. I think we were like, what if we got him to write it? He seems like a perfect candidate for it, and luckily he said yes. He was very, very cool about it, and I was really honored that he decided to do it. So, yeah.
We got a question back here.
I was curious what your favorite character in Polyester is.
Oh my gosh.
That's all you, girl. You wrote about it.
I mean, I love Lulu because she just is such a party girl, right? Like she can't even do anything without being like, yeah. Like when she opens a drink, she's like spurting it in the air, right? Like, I love the Baltimore Footstopper. Those kids, I love the kids because they're just so John Waters kids. Is it Cuddles? Is that the Edith Massey character? Cuddles. She's like a nouveau riche, like, Rasha Shah. Isn't that what she says at one point? Like, ooh, but I mean, honestly, Francine, to me, is Elizabeth Taylor. Like, I feel like Divine was channeling Elizabeth Taylor in that movie, which is so perfect. Even down to the purple. Like Francine Fishball's wearing purple, and I'm like, that is Elizabeth Taylor's color. Like if you watch Elizabeth Taylor movies, she's always in purple.
She gotta have those eyes popping.
I know, it's great. She would love this. She would love Agnes Scott.
She would also love your guest bathroom.
Oh, yeah, I do have an Elizabeth Taylor themed guest bathroom.
It's incredible.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Did you have a chronological, like, contemporary cutoff for what movies count as, like, falling into the cold or late night banner? Like, was anything too recent to include?
Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, I think that the franchise sort of, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like a TCM thing too. I mean, it's kind of like, if it doesn't matter if as long as it fits in and we can provide context to why it fits, right? Like 2 weeks ago, we played the documentary about Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Is the Mark Patton documentary about, I think it's called Scream Queen. And that movie came out like 2 years ago. And we played it with Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And it was great. Everybody, it was really a really great double feature. It was really well received and everything. And so, yeah, to that point, I think there is really no cutoff for a year, but I think it's mostly just about how does it fit and how can it play? Because I feel like the most recent title in the book is probably, is it The Decline of Western Civilization Part 3? That might be the newest. But yeah, that was really kind of no time cutoff, but yeah.
So back to the podcast. Kama says, "Hi Danielle and Millie, would you consider writing a book of the best of I Saw What You Did? Also, would you consider doing an episode where you had a fan as a guest for the movie themed segment? I talk at your podcast all the time."
We did have a fan on.
Yeah.
But it was to answer a letter.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a good idea.
Yeah.
I would, yeah, we would, if you're not weird, yeah. I mean, our producer will bet you.
Kama saw Garbage Pail Kids at the Boys and Girls Club as a kid. They said,
Wow.
Boys and Girls Club was showing. Oh, they did not know what they were showing us. They were like, these are those dumb cards they play with. Just show them that when we go take a nap in the back.
Like these kids need to learn about the art of farting someone's mustache off.
Oh. I mean, truly life-changing. But we floated the idea to each other of writing a book.
Yeah.
I don't know what context we would write it in. Like, would we do a book based on our podcast? It'd be hard to choose best of the podcast to write about. Because every episode makes me laugh very hard.
Yeah, I look, I'll do it. Whatever it is, I'll do it.
All right, yeah,
just
let's
to
do
be
it.
able to do it with you, I'll do it.
Yeah, we could definitely write knowing that you love sections and themes as you do, we do have a Christmas episode coming up where I indicate a really dark background for the McAllister family. And then you've also, I don't know, I feel like we could do some pretty interesting sections of like, here's what we really think was happening, and write about some movies.
You love taking down classics. That is your passion. You're like, when Harry Met Sally.
One of my favorite things in the world is when we post like, here are the movies coming up next week. People are like, oh my god, I love that one! And then I'm like, you ain't gonna love it after I get there. You're not gonna love it on Tuesday. You might love it now, but you are not coming back to love this shit on Tuesday. So, like, but yeah, I think we should do it. I think we could do it.
Yeah.
We're both authors.
Oh,
But yeah, if you want the book, then we will probably write the book.
Yeah.
I got nothing else going on.
Yeah, I'll do it.
And like I said, we write a book report every week for our movies anyway.
That's what I mean. I mean, I feel like we're already halfway there.
Yeah.
So
Let's do it. Thanks.
someone do it for us.
At least Kamala is ready, and we'll buy it.
All right, cool.
Yes.
Yes. Right on.
So you kind of have approached this already, but is there any movie that you didn't get to talk about yet that was kind of your favorite one to write
Oh gosh. I really really loved writing about the baby. That movie is really weird. And then I actually like Remember My Name. That is probably like one of my favorite movies to have written about. And we did an episode about it on the podcast too, because it just felt like such a, for me, if you know me, right? It's such a good text to like pick apart, right? It's just like a very interesting, lesser known 70s film, and you know, it has a great cast, a great director, and it's kind of like a movie that I felt like it's not really out in the world. I mean, I think now it's on Tubi or something like that, or it might be on the Internet Archive, but it was never on home video, and it was just not out in the world. And so I just felt like, I can't believe more people don't know about this movie. So when that happened, I was like, oh, I get to go real hard on this one, because I've been wanting to talk about it, and I've been thinking about it so much. So that was probably like one of the funnest.
And you address it in the book too, and I think it's something we talk about a lot, where this is the importance of also having different kinds of people in archival parts of the film industry, and people who will say like, actually, this is an important movie, we should actually distribute it.
Yeah.
And be part of that process.
Yeah, because that's like that world is very, like I said before, I mean, it's just so like, I don't know what it is. I don't want to say it's like, it's not like, there's so many films out there. I mean, like, and trust me, we are in an incredible era for film distribution. I mean, I think about the stuff that I did to get movies in the 90s.
Oh, it's dark.
I'm gonna tell the story, because this is such an Atlanta story. Sorry to everybody in France or wherever you are. I'm gonna tell an Atlanta story. So when I was in high school, I really wanted to see that movie, The Story of Ricky. And it was basically, does anybody remember The Daily Show when it was hosted by Craig Kilborn?
Yeah.
So they used to do this section called 5 Questions. And at the beginning of it, it was this graphic of a man smashing a head, like obliterating a head. It was clearly made of clay. But it was basically like a martial arts movie where a guy got his head exploded by another man, right? And I was always like, what is that? So I found out
You threw a bottle with a note in it into the ocean, and then somebody wrote back, it's the story of Ricky.
Right, it's like the pre-internet world. I found out there was this movie called Story of Ricky. No idea how to get it. And I had a friend who was, I was out in the burbs for high school, but I had this one friend who went to Grady High School. She was a city girl, and I was like, she's the coolest girl I've ever met in my life. She had this older boyfriend who worked the door at the old Claremont Lounge. Before the Claremont Lounge was the hotel. This is like when it was still pretty bad, right? And he dabbled in dubs, like VHS dubs. Okay.
Dabbled in Dubs is a great band.
Dabbled in dubs. So, and he was primarily like an Asian film guy. So if you needed any kind of martial arts movie, any kind of like Chinese ghost story, like whatever you needed, and you would have to go to the Claremont, and he would pull out of his back pocket this folded 4-page stapled his list. And this was all of the movies that he had that he could make you a copy of. And then you gave him $50. And then you would come back in a week and he would hand you a dubbed VHS tape of whatever movie you wanted from this list. And I did that to see The Story of Ricky. I went to the Claremont Lounge. I was like 17 years old, and I walked into this adult man and gave him $50 in cash just to be able to watch that movie. So, I mean, this was a whole...
If you ever deny your own street cred again when it comes to the film, I'm going to remind you of that story.
Yeah, and it was bad. Bad quality. It had been done for me like 9 times. So I paid $50 for basically garbage.
And risked your life.
And I risked my life. But yeah, adrenaline was running through my veins in those days. So
I mean, I don't think anyone could ask a better question or top that. So, that's the best tribute to your love of film that could possibly be. So
yes.
thank you all so very much for being here. This is really lovely. I love when we get to do these sort of, feminist events that are not immediately obviously feminist, but so clearly are. It's so important that we open up these avenues to different kinds of art, and representation does still matter. I think sometimes we think like, oh, well, you can watch anything anywhere all the time, but it's like, that's still not true.
Yeah.
And so, thank you for your work. Thank you for your work.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you everyone for wearing masks too. You know I don't like to leave my house, so thank you for that.
Yeah, we don't fuck around and cares. So we are gonna have a book signing here for our folks watching at home. Click this teal button to buy your copy of TCM Underground from Karis. You can also support the work of Karis Circle, our nonprofit, by clicking the donate button, which is going to pop up right now. So we're going to say goodnight to all of you. We really appreciate you watching from around the world. We will send you your books. Good night, everyone.